Great. Good afternoon, all. I hope this finds you and your loved ones safe and healthy during these interesting and very challenging times. My name is Patty Simonton, and I'm the director of the Be Green Business Program here at Bethesda Green. Thank you for taking the time today to join us for the final session of our 5-part summer speaker series, Tackling Environmental Challenges Through Sustainable Entrepreneurship. Through our Be Green Business Program, we work to cultivate innovative eco-entrepreneurs and nurture the development of green businesses to ensure compatibility between economic development and environmental protection. To this end, as part of our B Corp program, we advise existing local businesses through B Corp certification and help them discover and implement best practices for sound governance, support for workers, and sustainability. Through our Innovation Lab, we are constantly on the lookout for leaders who are building for-profit business models around innovative and sustainable solutions to tackle environmental and social challenges. Since Bethesda Green launched its environmental programming in 2018, we have supported 18 companies ranging from idea stage to those raising seed and Series A investment rounds. At this time, we are actively recruiting for our Spring 2021 Accelerator cohort, as well as our Amplifier program. Entrepreneurs who are interested in joining the Bethesda Green community are invited to contact me directly to learn more. You can reach me at innovationlab@bethesdagreen.org. During today's session, we're going to talk about smart cities, circular design, and the business models needed to make it all work. We'll also discuss the challenges of building a circular economy on a local, state, and federal level, and how best to gain support among policymakers. Here today, I'm excited to welcome 4 individuals who are well positioned to speak on these topics. Emily Yates is the Smart City Director for the City of Philadelphia, where she is responsible for managing and leading the implementation of the Smart City Philadelphia Roadmap that provides guidance on how smart and emerging technology solutions can improve the quality of life for residents, businesses, and visitors while improving the delivery of city services. Throughout her career, Emily has worked to help cities position themselves as globally competitive by utilizing a systems approach to develop these strategies, projects, and programs that exist within the intersection of sustainability, technology, and economic development. Most recently, Emily was Deputy Director with Envision Charlotte, where she was responsible for leading the development of the Circular Charlotte strategy, which made Charlotte the first city in the United States to have a citywide circular economy strategy. She's held a variety of positions in Europe and North America, including urban planning positions with both the District of Columbia and the City of Cleveland planning offices. She was a recipient of the prestigious Alexander von Humboldt German Chancellor Bundeskanzler Fellowship, which funded a year of research focused on German approaches to the implementation of sustainability policy and climate change adaptation in brownfield development. Emily holds a Bachelor's of Science in Landscape Architecture from Arizona State University and is a member of the Emerging Leaders in Energy and Environmental Policy Network. So glad you're here. Holly Elwood is a senior advisor for the EPA's Environmentally Preferable Purchasing Program, helping federal agencies factor the environment into purchasing decisions. Her work includes coordinating EPA and interagency technical input into product sustainability standard development efforts, helping shape and maintain EPA's recommendations of standards and eco-labels for federal procurement, and co-chairing the Federal Electronics Stewardship Working Group. She has received SPLC Individual Leadership Award for the development of the EPA recommendations, an EPA Gold Award for her role in the formation and implementation of the National Strategy for Electronic Stewardship, issued by the White House's Council on Environmental Quality, and was selected as a Fed 100, awarded to government and industry leaders who have played pivotal roles in the federal government's IT community, individuals who have gone above and beyond their daily responsibilities and have made a difference in the way technology has transformed their agency or accelerated their agency's mission. I love having smart people on these panels, it's so great. Anna Fraisse-Tilden works in the Strategic Initiatives Department, working alongside the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives on shared value implementations and M&E strategy and alignment advisory services, circular economy, and energy poverty initiatives, as well as business development for Pixera Global. Previously, she worked in the Enterprise and Community Development Department, focusing on SME capacity building, and managed the MBAs Without Borders program. She is a member of the Pixera Global Environment Working Group and leads the Zero Plastic Waste Initiative. Prior to working at Pixera Global, Anna worked in corporate social responsibility and international sales at an international vegetable seed company. She also spent time working at a local organization, helping businesses and individuals reduce their carbon footprints. So glad you could join us. And last but not least, our moderator today is Heidi Sumser, a sustainability consultant with a focus on the circular economy and green finance, particularly in emerging markets. She has broad exposure in microfinance and small business banking, impact investing, sustainability, energy efficiency and renewable energy, energy finance, and development finance consulting. Most recently, she was the Green Lending Officer in Latin America for Responsibility Investments AG in Peru. Heidi is a mentor for Bethesda Green's Innovation Lab, so we're happy that she's here too. We know that our entrepreneurs love working with her as well. Thank you all for being here today. We'll keep the conversation going until approximately 2 p.m. and then open the floor up to questions until about 2:15. I invite attendees to please use the chat to submit your questions. If you prefer for questions to be asked anonymously, you may submit your questions directly to me. On the chat, I'm listed as Bethesda Green. Before I kick it off to Heidi, I would like to just conduct a short poll of our attendees here. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this, and if you all could just please take a minute or two and just quickly answer these questions. If you find that you're answering other as part of one of the options, I invite you to use the chat to complete, just fill in the comments there. We're very interested in sort of where you all are thinking. Okay, and I'll share the results when we're done so you can all see this too. It looks like we have a nice distribution of entrepreneurs and students, investors, IT, building construction, which is great. Okay, just another maybe 15 seconds. So if you haven't had a chance to please complete this. Lots of entrepreneurs in the room, great. Okay, go ahead and end this poll and share this with you. Great. And like I said, I invite you to add comments in the chat for the others if that's what you've answered. All right, stop sharing here. And I will hand it over to Heidi. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Patty. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'd just like to start off before we dive in with the panelists, just a brief overview of the circular economy, explain what it is, the principles, and talk a little bit about systems thinking to kind of set the conversation. So first of all, what is the circular economy? I'm sure many of you know, but in case not, it's our current linear extractive system that basically can be summarized by take, make, waste. And given the fact that we have finite resources, that we have increasing populations and demand and imminent crises, the current pandemic being an example, as well as climate change, increasing amounts of waste, we really need a system reset. And COVID actually highlights the fact that we need a more resilient, more inclusive system that also offers better economic opportunities. And so circular economy allows for value creation in terms of jobs, in terms of finding value in what previously was maybe known as waste, for raw materials into new products. And it also offers opportunities for partnerships within businesses and entrepreneurs, but also across sectors. For example, public-private partnerships and other types of collaboration. This transition is already underway. This is not new. And what the underpinnings of the circular economy, for example, there are 3 principles. First, it's to design out waste and pollution. The second is to keep products and materials in use. And the third is to regenerate natural systems. So I'll repeat them for emphasis and also in case you missed them, because these really are important and they really are what guide the circular economy. It's not prescriptive, but it enables everyone to kind of find a way to dive in. So design out waste and pollution. It's not only just about managing waste, but it's really more about eliminating it and pollution from the outset. It's about keeping products and materials in use for as long as possible at the highest value possible. And it's also about regenerating natural systems. There are actually various design strategies that can be used to implement circular economy. Just to mention a couple, there's product life extension, there's modularity, there's dematerialization, and one that I'm a big fan of, which is switching from products to services. So this product as a service model offers opportunities, and it really flips what is the traditional model of we as consumers or users own things, t-shirts, telephones, containers, but actually the company or the business owns these materials. They manage them over the course of a lifetime, and to us, they rent them out through subscription models or pay-as-you-go type systems. And systems thinking is actually very critical to circular economy. What is systems thinking? I'm sure many of you know, but it's about taking a holistic, comprehensive approach to business models, to policy, to design, where it's not about the individual components or the individual actors, but about the relationships between them and the interconnectedness among both these components as well as different stakeholders, and understanding and assessing the consequences, both intended and unintended, really starting at the design stage. And circular design, in essence, is about implementing systems thinking and a new mindset to understand and conceptualize from the beginning how this can all work. So for example, are we designing t-shirts, electronics, appliances, buildings so that they can be disassembled at the end of life? So from a life cycle management standpoint, are we actually thinking longer term that not only they can last for a while, but also how are we going to break them down and repair and reuse and share, refurbish, et cetera? Or are we actually designing things for a short life cycle so that very quickly we buy more of the same at lower quality? And this is known as planned obsolescence. And finally, leadership is really critical to this transition to the circular economy and getting everyone involved. Everyone needs to and can play a role in this mindset change, both at the individual as well as the collective level. And also we need examples, we need inspiration, and we need demonstration cases, which now I would like to invite our panelists to share. So with that, let me open up the conversation and first start with Emily. Emily, while working in Charlotte, you led the effort to develop the nation's first circular economy strategy at the city level, very successfully. If you could tell us a little bit about that experience and how that prepared you for your work now in Philadelphia.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm always excited to talk circular economy with people who appreciate it. So in Charlotte, it was an interesting experience. When I arrived at Envision Charlotte, we had just gotten a new city manager, and Charlotte was a weak mayor city manager system. So I'll give a little bit of background because it feeds into how my experience was. Charlotte was going through a lot of things. One is they were not known for anything in particular. They were good at like everything, or kind of, there wasn't one thing that identified Charlotte and gave them a brand. And then we had also dealt with things there was a shooting, a police shooting, and there were some uprisings afterwards. And there was the realization through a Harvard study that a child born into poverty in Charlotte had a 4% chance of getting out of poverty in his or her lifetime, which was shocking because Charlotte is home to banks. It's the second largest financial district in the United States. And so all of these kind of came together with the new city manager, and he was like, I need something that gives us an identity, a brand. What is nobody doing? What can we be leaders in? And I was like, well, nobody's doing circular economy in the United States at this point. Everybody's in the 100 resilient cities. He had just come from Norfolk, so he was familiar with that. And they're like, what is that? And so, at first I had to really kind of start to do some education. And that's always been a consistent thing that comes with the circular economy so far in conversations, because it is still so nascent in the US versus policy in Europe. And it was a lot of understanding what the city manager was looking for. So where can we get a win-win-win for everybody involved? And that's kind of how I marketed the concept of circular economy. I was like, listen, it's a new economic revenue stream opportunity. It is jobs for a variety of individuals, both the underskilled, hard to employ, up through innovation creation and kind of creating yourself as an innovation hub for entrepreneurs. By the way, it'll help you achieve your climate targets, which you've committed to through the Bloomberg Challenge, and kind of going through all of that. And he's like, okay, I kind of see what you're looking for, and this sounds interesting. And then very serendipitously, we were able to organize a study tour to Amsterdam and Rotterdam, where I could take them to all these really cool places and they could see what was happening in action. And that was that was what sealed the deal for the city manager. We were literally sitting in a meeting with the firm Metabolic, which is the systems consulting firm out of Amsterdam. If you guys want to know anything about circular economy, they have been thought leaders on this space and are just a bunch of brilliant individuals and helped us write the Circular Charlotte strategy. But, she's giving a presentation and he turns to me and he's like, how quickly can we contract with them? I want this. So it was really it was not a typical process for getting buy-in, to be quite honest. It was very serendipitous that all of those pieces came together and that we were able to make the argument that it wasn't only an environmental approach, but it was really an economic paradigm shift that the city needed to approach for a variety of reasons: to be globally competitive, to be able to retain and attract talent, to create jobs, to hit all these boxes that he was, under the microscope for. And so that was my experience. We came back from Amsterdam because I was with an NGO. I was able to procure very quickly a contract with Metabolic, which was another great thing that I'm realizing now that I'm on the other side of the table in Philadelphia, is having that procurement go around, because a challenge we're constantly dealing with in Philadelphia is the rate of innovation does not match the rate of procurement at all. And so, for my role here in Philadelphia, what I've taken from that experience is, again, trying to identify who my champions are within City Hall. What targets are we trying to achieve? We have a zero waste by 2035 goal. We've committed to C40, so we're in line with the Paris Climate Accord. We have a 25% poverty rate here in Philadelphia, which is huge for a city this size. 25% of our population lives at or below federal poverty level. So there's clearly a need for jobs and new economic opportunities. We have a ton of universities here that are brilliant. So how am I tapping into that? And so that's really where I've been able to prepare me for the work that I'm doing here, and kind of finding those serendipitous moments. And I can share a bit more about one of the pilots we're doing later on in the conversation that touches on that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Emily. I think that really highlights the systems approach and also how a lot of these issues are interconnected. And you mentioned this sort of new economic paradigm and bringing in everything from job creation to helping meet climate targets to how can going from Charlotte to Philly, how can this increase the profile of the city and really help achieve existing targets and goals and move things forward? I think that's actually really, really critical. As a follow-on, you also mentioned that, you are the Smart City Director at Philadelphia, and could you talk a little bit about how you kind of linked the smart city concept to sustainability and to circular economy broadly to other areas?
Yeah, I think in the simplest way, both sustainability targets and circularity and smart city targets are all underpinned by technology, innovation, and data, which is essentially my role here in Philadelphia, is to take those kind of tools and create efficiencies and improve quality of life for the citizens of Philadelphia in an equitable and inclusive way, which is very much a mouthful. But, and so I think, the way that I've been trying to reshape the conversation within City Hall is that, similar to sustainability, smart cities should be an overarching organizing principle, that we should be thinking through as we're making decisions about how can tech and data help you make a better informed decision or a more efficient decision. And you should use that lens in line with sustainability, because they touch every department. There's not really, we have IT departments in every department. So therefore you're doing something with technology and data. How can we better facilitate that cross-departmental collaboration and a systems approach to things, which is, again, very much the circular economy, which is tech enabled. You look at a lot of the solutions and they're focused either on data or technology. And I think, that's really ultimately how I've come to kind of pull circularity under my umbrella of work.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's shift over to Anna. Anna, Pixera Global has been working with local governments as well as the private sector and other organizations to help develop. You're focusing really now on two areas, so circular cities and the zero plastic waste communities. If you could tell us a little bit about the approach, this localized approach that you use to both develop and execute these projects, and where are your sort of priority cities and priorities around the zero plastic waste.
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to say thank you so much for having me here. I'm also excited to talk about circular economy to anyone who will listen. But yeah, so a little bit about Pixera Global. We leverage our unique strengths, the unique strengths of corporations, governments, social sector organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to enhance the abilities of people and communities to solve complex problems and attain mutually beneficial goals. So with that in mind, what we would like to do is we work closely with our clients and our partners to assess, design, implement, scale, and amplify circular interventions that has community buy-in, also creates jobs and dramatically reduces plastic waste. And as you mentioned, we do have these two initiatives that we are very much focused on. The first is Circular Cities, which is very much in line with what Emily was saying, through these public-private partnerships, really incentivizing marginalized community members to engage on circularity to help improve their lives and livelihoods. And the second being Zero Plastic Waste Communities, where we work with our corporate partners to assess, design, implement, and scale these circular interventions that does have community buy-in, creates jobs, and also dramatically reduces plastic waste. We are a global organization, so our focus here in the US is primarily with circular cities. We have a project in the works, and I won't quite mention the city yet because it needs to be presented to the mayor, but on the zero plastic waste community side, we are working in rural Rajasthan, India, as well as West Africa, in particular Nigeria and Ghana.
Great. Yeah, I think it's also worth mentioning the fact that you guys work not only globally in Africa and developing countries, but also here in the United States. So there's clearly some opportunities, for example, with Emily or her counterparts in other cities, as well as with Holly, even at the federal level. Great. Just a follow-on question to that. You explained a little bit about the approach. You do an assessment of a community. So at the city level, or maybe it's at a more local level, how do you go about doing this assessment? What do you look for, and how do you kind of get the buy-in and work sort of from the design phase onward to then carry out these different projects?
That's a great question. I think the first foremost, more important piece of it all is making sure that we have the right community partners involved to conduct the assessment. We are global, but that does not mean that we are physically in every location that we go into. So we want to make sure that we find localized partners that allow us to listen and also work alongside the community. So we do not do the traditional development models where we go in and assess and provide a solution to a community, but we engage with them and listening to them and have them tell us what their problems are and how we can work together on a solution. In this particular case, we really like to assess the community's waste management infrastructure, kind of see where they are and the gaps that we could potentially fill. Of course, looking at population's behavior as it regards to waste reduction and reuse. So what does education look like? What kind of interventions do we think we would need in those spaces? Public sector incentives and investments in circular economy activities. So depending on where we are, where are they in terms of circular economy? Do we have to educate them on what that might look like? Or can we work alongside to continue to push some of these initiatives? And finally, really working with the private sector on investment potential. So is there opportunity for return on investment if they fund some of these projects? And how can we better make their business work efficiently?
Great, and just expanding a little bit on the private sector involvement, of course, investment is absolutely crucial from startup funding onward, but what other roles does the private sector play in the collaboration, the partnerships that you carry out? Where do you see opportunities or maybe examples of opportunities for entrepreneurs or for existing businesses?
Something that we're seeing a lot of is the technology and data space. I mean, they obviously are great funders, right? If we're looking especially at multinational companies, it's wonderful to have them as like our backbone funders. But there's just a lot of opportunities as we do work with the waste streams, for example. We need people who are able to provide some of these, I guess if we look at like recycling, for example, how do we kind of take a look at what is happening in the city? What kind of infrastructure do they have? How can we work with the cities to expand their recycling programs? Or is there a way we can track waste and where it goes and what companies need certain types of waste materials that others are just have an excess of? I mean, there are so many different opportunities in the technology and data space, and understanding the value of the materials that people have to work with, that I would say those two are the biggest areas that we've seen.
Okay, great, thank you. So tech and data, as well as investment, sort of this whole waste stream management and tracking that goes along with it, as well as, again, when you get to the end, the recycling infrastructure, which really is not yet at par with what we need to be able to use an increasing amount of recycled materials in new and refurbished products. Great, let's move now to Holly. Holly, you've been at the EPA and really been fundamental in developing these IT sustainability and technology purchasing guidelines at the federal level with an over $500 million, I believe it's $1 trillion budget annually, the largest in the US, so clearly the most important purchaser. Could you tell us a little bit about these sustainability guidelines, what they entail for equipment and technologies?
Sure. So I'm part of EPA's Environmentally Preferable Purchasing Program, and we help federal agencies buy more sustainable products and services. And the way that we do that is first by helping to define what we mean by a sustainable product or service. So we have focused our efforts on helping to provide US government technical input into the development of product sustainability standards for products and services that feds buy a lot of, that where we have influence in the market with the power of our pocketbook. So I am our lead on our engagement in the development of product sustainability standards around electronic products. And with that, what we've tried to do is build holistic life cycle focused standards that look at all the key hotspots of electronic products across their life cycle. And we absolutely see as a core of all of that work integrating and trying to incentivize increased circularity in the electronic supply chain as part of that effort. So we have a lot of different ways that we've done that. We have built criteria that incentivizes and ensures that the products are, that manufacturers offer an end-of-life management take-back program at the end of a product's life. And once they take the product back, they ensure that the products are, if they're going to be recycled, are going to a recycler who's certified to an environmentally responsible electronics recycling standard. We also have built criteria that incentivizes disassemblability, easy disassemblability of the products, inclusion of recycled content into the product itself, and a whole host of various other issues around availability of spare parts, and also reuse of rare earths. And I can offer an example of what that looks like and the results that we've gotten later on as we get into more detail. But once we build the standards, we then help feds to buy products that meet those standards. And currently in the US government, we're required to procure EPEAT registered products. EPEAT stands for the Electronic Product Environmental Assessment Tool. And all the standards that I work on form the basis for EPEAT. So products have to meet those standards in order to then become EPEAT registered. So for us, it's been a very nice tool as a way to use the power of the federal dollar and our pocketbook to then shift to a more sustainable marketplace overall.
Okay, great, thank you. Could you talk a little bit in the development and then implementation of these guidelines across all these different federal agencies? You mentioned the tools, which of course is critical to manage and assess this, but this sort of tension between trying to promote sustainability, environmentally friendly policies, and in this case, equipment and technology, with also promoting usage, which has the opposite effect on emissions.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're constantly struggling with trying to find the sweet spot, and that is the key issue and tension throughout all product sustainability standards development. So we want to make sure that the criteria is as rigorous as possible to try to move us as far down the path towards meeting our ultimate goals around increased sustainability for a product or service, while also ensuring that we have enough products available that meet the criteria that purchasers can actually have something to buy. So if we build criteria that's way too rigorous, that's fabulous, but there won't be any products to buy and we don't succeed at all in that instance. If the criteria is way too weak and everything can buy it, well, then we're not really shifting the market in any positive way at all. So we're constantly trying to figure out where that balance point is, and based on where we are in the market today, and where manufacturers are able to shift. And we do that with a whole host of stakeholders, NGOs, electronics recyclers, manufacturers, suppliers, all participating in that conversation to try to decide how aggressive can we be at this point in terms of the criteria that we can build into these standards. And then we update them over time to reflect what the changes are in the market and get more aggressive as we go.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about, are these standards that are obligatory? Like, are there minimum environmental or sustainability standards that the different agencies have to follow? Or are these recommendations that in some way give preference but don't oblige the different agencies to actually procure sustainable technologies?
Well, we have both. We have statutory requirements in the federal government to ensure that we are buying sustainable products. Unfortunately, those have been built over time when we knew a lot less about products and services, and we're sort of trying to deal with one part of the elephant at a time. So we have one requirement to buy recycled content containing products. We have one requirement to buy energy efficient products, energy used during the use phase of a product. We have another program that requires us to buy bio-based products that contain bio-based materials. Our program has been focused and was directed by President Clinton to try to look holistically and try to integrate all of those elements into one standard, because purchasers need to ask for one thing. We need to simplify this for them and put it in a comprehensive package that is easy for them to utilize and easy for manufacturers to respond to. So it also helps us when we do that to really look at some of the trade-off issues that come up when you're looking at a lot of different tensions between different positive environmental attributes that you're trying to achieve. For example, with recycled content, sometimes there's legacy chemicals in recycled content, and you need to be able to take a close look at that and have that inform what kind of recycled content percentages you're going to go for in order to respond and make sure you're considering that appropriately. You wouldn't want to put a huge amount of recycled content into a toy, for example, recycled content plastic, if you're not really looking closely at the kind of plastic that you're going to be encouraging to be incorporated into that toy. So that's the kind of thing that we try to do in these standards. And right now, my program has a suite of recommended standards and eco-labels for use in federal purchasing. We are required in the federal government to buy EPEAT registered electronic products, which includes mobile phones, imaging equipment, televisions, servers, and computers. However, the rest of our recommended standards and eco-labels are recommended for use, but they're not required right now. They were under Obama, they were not under Trump, and we'll see where policy heads in the future.
Okay. Lots of, yeah, opportunities there for the future. I think you mentioned a couple things that are worth highlighting. You mentioned obviously sustainability and environmental and circular criteria evolve. You end up having this mix of things, and similar to what Emily said about smart cities, and let's take what's already here and people are already buying into, there's a sort of definition. There's no one right way to do this. And so there's the challenge of simplifying things so that everyone can understand and then do something with it, and also consolidating. And obviously at the federal level, that is a huge challenge. And then you have, you know, the political winds that blow one way or another that doesn't make that any easier. And then you're also working across a whole suite of products, even within just IT, which is its own area. And then you also mentioned trade-offs. And for example, if you're looking at recycled content, you also have to take into account if it's something that was made a while ago, how are there toxic chemicals or other things in there that really shouldn't be recycled, but you know, we should do something else with it. And I think that also points again back to the design phase. So really when you're talking about starting a business or creating a product from scratch, that's really when you can have an influence on that, because once things are made and they're not designed for, you know, sustainability or design for disassembly, as you mentioned, that's much more difficult. Maybe we could just end this series of questions with just an example of what you were just talking about with one of the agencies, and maybe something that's worked well and something that hasn't worked as well in terms of sustainable procurement implementation.
Oh, well, with computers, we've done a really good job of being able to implement our procurement of sustainable EPEAT registered products. And that's because the way that we buy computers is very centralized in the government. So we have very few contracts that we need to go into, take a look at, and try to revise to incorporate requirements into those contracts. And there's also been, so that's made it a lot easier. There's a set of core configurations in the federal government for all of the computers that we buy that were built to try to deal with security issues, because the more different kinds of product we have that are being utilized within our inventory, the more opportunities and vulnerabilities exist in terms of security. So there was a reason to build a set of core configurations to then allow more standardization, not only to increase our security, but also to give us more economical prices across the government for the computers that we were procuring. So we've been able to integrate EPEAT successfully into that because the people who run the core configurations are very committed to that work, and we work in partnership with them. We also, the Green Electronics Council that runs EPEAT has done a very good job of running an awards program that recognizes the work that purchasers undertake in the procurement departments across purchasing organizations, not just in the federal government, but far beyond that, hospitals, hotels, banks, you name it, state governments, universities, to ensure that they're getting more sustainable electronic products. And I think, you know, it sounds funny, but having an awards program has really been a very helpful mechanism, I think, to get focus and attention to doing the work that's needed to ensure that more sustainable electronics are being procured in organizations across the globe. So I think those are some of the key lessons that a good example I can give you. It's not the same with televisions, for example. It's a lot harder because 90% of TVs are bought by individual consumers. So the federal government doesn't have as much of a leverage point there. And so it's harder to really make an influence in that product category.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a good example of where centralized purchasing actually has its advantages in terms of economies of scale and costs, and also security, as you mentioned. In other cases, you would see we're actually decentralizing, you know, production and transport and other things could also have its advantages. And you also mentioned the awards program, which highlights the need for different types of incentives for people to actually move forward, economic or otherwise. So great. Maybe just link to that, Emily. I understand that Philadelphia wants to become sort of an R&D city and known for its R&D, and there's also been some work on computers at the city level in Philadelphia. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that compared to what Holly just mentioned about the, the large purchasing and management of computers, but how you've been doing that in Philadelphia.
So one of the key parts of our Smart City Roadmap is that we need to develop partnerships to really drive innovation. We believe that cities are essentially living labs, and we want people to pilot their technology here. We're happy to work with them to create an environment that allows for them to test it. We've got a couple pilots going on to do just that, and kind of part of my role has been to develop those partnerships both with our universities and companies here, that are doing this work. In terms of computers, we don't have a lot of them anymore because they're all being used for work from home. Sorry, I'm like trying to figure out where I want to go with this. So in terms of procuring computers, we similar to the federal government, it's a security issue, right? We want to have more consistent computers. What we didn't realize prior to COVID hitting us was the need to have laptops versus desktops. We actually experienced a bit of a digital divide internally as well as externally in our city. And we have a pilot with a company called Retriever, which was another one of those serendipitous moments. They are funded by Closed Loop Fund out of New York City, and basically they do a no-contact pickup of textiles and e-waste, which are two large components of our waste stream. And we've been trying to figure out a way to collect the technology in the city, to refurbish and repurpose to address our digital divide, which is about 25% of our households in Philadelphia, which may or may not correlate to our poverty level, have limited access to internet and technology that can meet their needs, right? So we're not counting that having a smartphone is what you need in order to do things like apply for jobs, participate in telehealth calls or whatever. And so we're utilizing this Retriever, which responded to our first challenge that we issued through our pitch and pilot program to help us address and achieve the 2035 target of zero waste. So we're partnering with them right now to do tech collections. They're providing it to, or they will be providing it to refurbishers local, and those will be distributed to our citizens. But the challenge that we've had in terms of city e-waste being repurposed for that is like ensuring that the policy allows for it to be viewed not as trash, but as a resource or an asset. And then that allows us to repurpose it through this process. So we're kind of looking into that right now.
Very interesting, thank you. Yeah, it's part of that mindset shift, right? And even just simple things like definitions, you sometimes just have to change the definition of it's not waste, it's now raw material, it's a resource. Interesting. Linked to sort of waste, could you tell us a little bit about these urban mining projects that you're working on? First of all, what is an urban mine?
Let me unmute. Yeah. Absolutely. So we had two responses to our first challenge around waste. The one was Retriever, and then the other was this concept of an urban mining tool. And basically, the tool is a way of making use of a project that Metabolic, so they will constantly pop up in my life because they're amazing to work with. They developed for the Netherlands, where you can identify the material, financial, and environmental potential of utilizing waste from your construction and demolition waste stream. So that's essentially the urban mine is you are mining for stuff within the urban space. You're not, taking new concrete, you're not taking new drywall. You're literally saying, this is what's in our waste stream. How can we repurpose it and reuse it and create kind of a close the loop in this regional sense? And so the tool is able to provide a baseline estimate of both our waste generation and the demand for materials such as concrete, wood, glass, metals, insulation, even like ceiling tiles. And then our hope is that we would scale it up into a larger comprehensive mining platform that we could connect. We could connect with all the different entities in Philadelphia. But the key part of this was just even getting a basic understanding of what is in our waste stream in terms of construction and demolition. We have a huge illegal dumping issue here because it costs so much and we have so many vacant properties. We just have people, rather than go to a transfer station, they'll just dump it on a property, and we don't have any way of catching them unless somebody calls it in, and then we send police cars. So the hope is not only to reduce our waste, but also to create, again, to the economics, create an economic argument for, hey, don't dump it, just bring it to a transfer station, or if we can have a resource hub where we have people who will sort our materials into kind of piles and opportunities for you to reuse it. We already have somewhat of an organic ecosystem around that. We have companies that are demolished or, being brought in to take down buildings because we have such historic buildings. There's a lot of value in the wood and the bricks and the metals already. So we're just hoping to kind of use this as the way to bring the whole space together to really create that ecosystem from design to end of life.
Okay. Thank you, Emily. And I'd like to turn to you now. We talked a little bit about buy-in, leadership buy-in, how that's so critical, at the C-suite level, but also stakeholder buy-in at all levels. If you could tell us a little bit about how important that's been for Pixera, and maybe give us an example of when it's worked well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have even provided trainings on this type of collaboration because it's so important, even on a small scale, to build the partnerships and get leadership buy-in. So something that we do is when we're looking at the, apologize for my dog. When we're thinking about getting buy-in, we really think about who the person is that we're speaking to. Do we need to come to them with a more economic approach, environmental or social approach, or how can we integrate it all into one thing? So one of the things that we'd like to do is find internal champions or change makers within either our organization or within other organizations to help them work together to find a reason, to pursue these different initiatives. And we also like to show examples of how this has worked in the past. So most of the time when we're talking to people, we really need to make the case and drive how circular interventions will drive profit and even capture market share. It's really important to most of the people that we're talking to, but then also how can they leverage that to drive some type of solution for a social problem. So a lot of what we've done is the partnerships that we need for the projects that we're working on are vast. We need everything from the corporate sector who might have the use for some of these interventions to the social sector that are already working so hard to push some of these interventions on the city level, but then also, again, on a smaller community level as well. And I think what we like to talk about is, for example, a well-known example is Adidas and how they actually partnered with Parley for the Oceans. So they designed and manufactured these shoes that were sourced from ocean plastics. And what we saw there was in 2015, it was a pilot that, they were kind of just testing the waters to see how that would work. But what has actually happened is it was a huge success. And they even announced that in 2024, all of their shoes would be made from ocean plastics. And that actually created this shockwave, through the athletic shoe industry, where all of these other companies started to find other recycled materials to incorporate into their shoes, into their products. And so we see that something like that type of collaboration was really helpful for both the company, but then also for Parley for the Oceans and pushing through their social agenda.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think Adidas is a great example of these, ocean plastic-based shoes where you're taking an waste stream and transforming into something that one looks attractive and is appealing. I think they're available starting next year, so I guess we have to get on the waiting list early. But then also can really start to shift the market and, you know, have a direct impact on competitors. And you mentioned the buy-in and the different examples. I think that's really good. And I think also your dog was reminding you that you need to make sure you have his or her buy-in as well. He's a key stakeholder. So good to keep that in mind. Good. Before we get to, I want to just do 2 more questions. So I want to allow enough time for the audience to ask their questions. If 1 or 2 of you want to chime in, just some examples of use that you have seen and experienced of business models that incorporate circular economy design, where you see that the private sector can really play a role and you see opportunities moving forward.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to this. I have a great example that I wanted to share today. We have worked for a couple of years ago, we started an effort to build a standard for sustainable servers. And we knew that there were rare earths that were used in the hard disk drives and servers, but we wanted to try to get people to start shifting to begin to increase the recycled rare earths and to actually start using recycled rare earths, because all of the rare earths at that point that were being utilized were all virgin. And but we really didn't know where to start. So EPA went into that standard development process and brought some stakeholders together. We brought Seagate, a major disk manufacturer in California, and the DOE Critical Minerals Institute together. And we just started brainstorming about, well, what kind of criteria could we build that would incentivize this to happen in the market? And it was really a tough issue. And finally, we decided to just build a criterion that would give credit to manufacturers who used a certain % of recycled rare earths in their disk drives moving forward. We really, when we built the criterion, had absolutely no idea if it was ever going to get used. Nobody had done it yet. We just kind of threw it out there and hoped that maybe by creating that opportunity, somebody might respond, and it happened. And Dell actually rose to the challenge and worked very closely with their suppliers to create a whole closed loop system where they started collecting the hard disk drives from their old products and their old servers, and then mining those materials out of those servers and reusing them in their servers that they sell today. So I think that's an excellent example of what we can do, and the kinds, just dramatic environmental and public health impact reduction that happens there, because there's massive water quality impacts and soil pollution impacts, not to mention just CO2 emissions from the manufacturing and the mining phase for rare earths. So by using rare earths that we've already mined, we've reduced all of those impacts dramatically. So kudos to Dell for that great work. And think about that next time you're buying a server. And it's and now other manufacturers are saw that example, and they're starting to look into doing this as well. So it's good stuff.
Okay, great. It's a great example. Thank you. Emily or Anna, do you have any examples you'd like to share?
I can share one that I'm aware of, not one that I've had the personal experience. I tried to make it happen, but it didn't. It's a company actually out of Germany that's based in South Carolina. And this is not what you would think of as a typical, in my mind, circular economy project, but a lot of cities are pushing to electrify their fleets, both their buses and their heavy duty fleet and kind of the daily driving fleet. And one of the hang-ups to that is the cost of buying a new bus. I think it's around $700,000 to get a fully new electric bus. That can be affected by procurement and whatnot, but a lot of cities are going to CNG buses, which is an easier retrofit. And there's this company out of Germany actually retrofits end-of-life buses to an electric platform. And so you basically get to keep the structure of the bus, which would otherwise go to the landfill. They just kind of pick it up, update the rotors or whatever is needed due to wear and tear, and then plop it on an electric platform for half the price of an electric bus. And it's so popular in Germany, they are overwhelmed by the demand, and it's happening the same here. They're having a lot of success around that as well. So I think that's just an example, again, of identifying a need that a city has and really providing a solution, recognizing kind of their constraints. And I think that's an important thing to understand in this concept of partnerships, is what, and I battle this all the time with trying to get, bridge the knowledge gap between like, how do you work with a city? Because a lot of times I work in the city and I still struggle sometimes with how do you work with us, right? Because we're just a massive ship that's hard to turn, and you kind of have to bend to our will in a way. And it's the same, I think, with federal and state governments, right? But what you have to understand is where we actually have impact. You know, we can develop partnerships, we can do policy, we can, you know, if you need us to shift policy, that's something we can look and explore to do. And then procurement, which Holly's been talking about. That is a massive lever that the city and public entities have to drive innovation, but we are not going to be the innovators, right? So we just need to create the space for you guys to be innovative and entrepreneurial. And that's why partnerships are so important, is because we can't, as a city, it's impossible for us because the level of risk that comes with innovation and entrepreneurship and all, you know, we're just encumbered too much with policies and rules and regulations and process. So I think that's why it's really important to have these public-private partnerships.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So one final question. You guys can each give your pitch, 20 to 30 second pitch. If you had a magic wand, and which you could wave right now, and make one lasting change to promote and accelerate the transition to a circular economy, what would it be?
I can go ahead. I think the one thing, and you kind of already mentioned this idea, is I would love for society to really start thinking about the approach to circular economy as designing out waste and pollution in the first place. I think that's fantastic because you don't have to deal with the waste once it's been generated, but really shifting that mindset would make things a whole lot easier as we move forward. And that to me is the most important thing.
Thanks, Anna. Emily?
This is a really hard one. There's so much. It's like, where do I go? I'm going to give you two, and hopefully it's not one of Holly's, but one is to have regional infrastructure in place that would allow for the loop to be closed, regardless of what the content is. And then just overall understanding of circularity and how it impacts us on a daily basis.
Yeah,
Thank
that was
you.
one of mine too.
Sorry, I couldn't pick.
No, it makes sense that we would have some that we share, right? I was going to say, I really want to just transform the market to rewarding longevity over the new shiny thing. I think that can be really tricky as purchasers. We often, don't want to bother. We just want to go with what's new and pretty. And maybe we haven't created a situation where we see benefit in a product lasting longer and seeing that as sexy. So I think we need to try to create a culture and a way of thinking that really gets us to move in that direction, as opposed to just buying something new every time we need to upgrade for whatever reason.
Okay, great. Thank you all. So let's open it up to the audience for questions. You can feel free to put them in the chat, but also feel free to unmute and ask them directly. We're a fairly small group, so you can ask the questions yourselves.
This is John. I see that there are some questions in the chat that are waiting.
Yes. Well, let me do one here, John, and then it's all you. It looks like, yeah. So Alexis, I believe Alexis is the first one.
Sure.
So what are some of the exciting initiatives that you're seeing in the hospitality travel space in regards to circular economy? And how can travel-focused businesses like hotels and commerce contribute to the idea of ecotourism in the aftermath of COVID? Anyone want to take a stab at that one?
Well, I have a couple ideas on that front. I mean, one, we've seen a lot of green hotel standards that have been stood up on a state level. I think it'd be very exciting if we could actually see that happen on a national level, so that there was consistency in terms of the messaging and the criteria across the US and possibly even globally, so that it's just easier for a purchaser to know to ask for, I want to buy, get a hotel room in a Green Star hotel, and to know what that means, no matter if you're getting a hotel room in Paris or the hotel room in Alabama somewhere. I think that would be really a great benefit. But there are some exciting things, I think, happening in the travel space that maybe we don't think of as part of the circular economy, but I think they really are. One of them is just Airbnb, because we are, making much better use of people's houses, which often lie dormant a lot of the time if we're off somewhere else, or if we have an extra room and we have an opportunity to utilize that space. I think that's a great business model that has really changed what's happening in the travel space. And also Turo, which is the same kind of idea, but for cars, where you can rent somebody else's car when you're on a trip to Charlotte or to Philadelphia. And I think that helps us to make better use of existing products and services that we own, so that we are maximizing the use of that product and not having to have too many additional products available in the market to meet people's needs for just a small amount of time. So those are the things I would think of.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I don't really follow the hospitality and travel space in my position, but I think I can take some of the conversations that I'm having around reuse and the perception of cleanliness would probably apply to that in terms of Airbnb. And, I used to use Zipcar, and, I instantly stopped using it in the time of COVID because I didn't know what their cleaning process was. And, I didn't want to take that risk. So I think, and we're seeing that with public transit right now is, are people comfortable? It's a lot of the data coming back is that it's just the perception of cleanliness makes people instantly feel better. The cup reuse programs that organizations like the Closed Loop Fund are pushing, a big pushback now has been the perception of cleanliness on that. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, is making people feel safe utilizing things that are not brand new.
Yeah, really good point. This perception of cleanliness, and actually what cleaning and sanitation protocols are you following? And I think in the built environment and, particularly hospitality, that's key. And that's also, of course, one of the challenges that was the other part of the question. Great. Real quickly, the name of the German company? Could you just repeat that?
Intech.
Okay, Intech. Great.
Also, I think something else I wanted to point out in Europe, I don't know how many of you have gone to a hotel in Europe where you can actually put a card that you're given into the door, when you come into the room, and that allows electricity to happen in your room. And when you leave, you're required to take the card out. And it's just an incredible way to increase the efficiency of the building. And I would love to see us do that in the US and get rid of turn down service. Why do we have that? Why do you walk into a hotel room? Well, I did this in Portland last year, and they had all the lights on and the television on to make me feel more comfortable, to make me feel like I was at home. I'm not sure. I think that should be banned personally. So lots of opportunities.
Indeed. Okay, John, I think you had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't really have a specific question, but just more sort of looking at the gaps and some of the challenges in deploying circular economy, and just thinking about, thank you to all the speakers and Heidi for moderating all of your experiences from the different areas, thinking about private sector, public sector, policy, entrepreneurialism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess one of the things, I'm working on a circular plastics model for the food service sector right now. And and thinking about these different sort of scopes of initiative impacts, what are some of the ways that you're supporting? Because with policy, you've got massive scale, but it takes a long time. with entrepreneurs on the ground can work faster, rapidly prototype their business models, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, test, all that kind of thing. And then, fail quickly, learn quickly, et cetera, and then build scale. So how are you finding the ways to support that entrepreneurial community? Because one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing is because I'm not seeing enough action quickly enough on the large scales. And so I got tired of waiting. And so we're trying to push the envelope and change those legacy infrastructures like recycling to address the legacy infrastructure with all its inefficiencies and its limitations due to its, to its large sort of singular systemic scale. So how are you addressing supporting those smaller scale, rapidly prototyping circular entrepreneurs that are out there, and help them, scale?
Well, I can speak to what we're doing in the federal government. We have something called the Small Business Innovation Research Program, and we provide funding to small businesses to basically try to pilot and test innovative technologies to move us to a more sustainable world. In that program, just as an example, to get back to the sort of circularity link, there's a company that just received an SBIR grant based in Chicago. Wish I could remember their name, but they basically do IT asset management. And as part of their receiving of that grant, they have then partnered with the Defense Logistics Agency, and they're going to be piloting out how to improve the asset management program at DLA to make it easier for people when they're done with their computer or their chair to put it into the disposition system, so that all of us then get access to that product in the federal government in that system and can reuse that product or service before it would then go out and be auctioned off to the private sector. So hopefully we'll maximize reuse through that activity, and that group will get some ability to really test out their business model and then be able to expand it way far beyond the federal government space as well. We need to do that better. We don't do that as well. We also have a green chemistry program, an awards program in my office, and we're talking now about how once we give the award, yay, somebody can say they got the award, but do we then link them to something like the SBIR program or other funders and investors, out there in the space who really would like to work with these companies that we've evaluated and we've highlighted their work and we think it's worth putting some funding into, and just try to create more relationships like that so that it isn't just a, yay, you get an award and we're done with you kind of a situation. So.
From our perspective, there are a couple of different things that we do. Not only do we have these two different initiatives at Pixera Global, but we also provide corporate employee engagement, specifically in the circular economy space for this particular conversation. But we will design and execute a skills-based volunteer program that offers the opportunity for employees from a particular company to go out into the world and engage with either social enterprises, nonprofits, or even small businesses that need support. That doesn't come just in the form of a grant, but actually provides them the support that they need to get their products up and running. And something else that we often do with our clients is they will host a type of challenge internally, but look for opportunities to work with small, medium-sized enterprises that might have new innovations that they could then pilot within their corporation. So really providing we kind of facilitate those relationships that will help bring up these entrepreneurs, and at the same time still provide a value to our corporate partners. And again, this can be done not just with grants, but then how can we help facilitate the opportunity for a shared collaboration.
And then I'll just chime in very quickly. We have a program called Pitch and Pilot, and that's our effort to kind of remove risk from some of the attempts for companies to work with the city. We usually do about a 3-month pilot on a limited procurement level, and capture metrics from it. And if it's successful, then we work with that company to try to scale it up and bring in the relevant departments to share the data and say, this was successful, it needs to be scaled up, let's figure out how to do that. We also try to act as a convener. And so if an entity comes to us and says, we're trying to pilot this, can you help us, pull in these players? And then sometimes having the city on your side is very helpful in that sense. We don't currently have the financials to really provide a lot of support, but we're always happy to partner and contribute where we can.
Thank you for the comments and insights.
Thank you. I think we have time for one final quick question if anyone has a burning one still.
No, I think we'll probably just wrap it up.
If not, then yeah, we can wrap it up.
That sounds great. I'd really like to thank all 4 of you for taking time out of your afternoon and sharing with us your wisdom, your experiences, the examples that you shared, I think are really valuable, and just kind of seeing how all of these pieces fit together and how there are so many opportunities for entrepreneurs to kind of be a very active part of this solution-based effort that we all have to be a part of. So thank you. Attendees, we will be mailing out emailing out the recording for this. Let's see if I can pull up the link, or Marisa, if you can grab it briefly, we'll just share the summaries of this session, and past ones are all on our website as they are finalized and published. So I invite you to take a look at some of the recordings from the past speaker series of this session as well. And stay in touch. Again, my email is innovationlab@bethesdagreen.org. If you would like to learn more about participating in our program or applying to the Accelerator program, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are also recruiting for our Amplifier program to support kind of later stage companies too. So with that, Heidi, Holly, Anna, Emily, thank you all for your time today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.